Before we get into this story, I need you to understand something. What I'm about to tell you actually happened to me 3 years ago, and it's the reason I will never live in an apartment building again. No matter how good the deal is, no matter how convenient the location. This isn't some campfire story I heard from a friend of a friend. This happened to me, and if you've ever lived in an apartment, you'll understand exactly why this terrified me so much. Post 2 seconds. If you're alone right now, maybe turn on a light. You're going to want to. My name is Alex, and in 2021, I was 24 years old, fresh out of college, and living in my first solo apartment in Minneapolis. The building was old, probably built in the 1970s, but the rent was cheap and it was only 15 minutes from my new job as a graphic designer. I was on the 3rd floor, apartment 3C. The place was small, just a studio with a bathroom and a tiny kitchen area. But it was mine, and I was proud of it. The building itself had that vintage charm that landlords love to advertise. What they don't mention is that vintage charm means thin walls, creaky floors, and pipes that sound like someone's playing the drums at 3 a.m. I moved in on a Saturday in September. The previous tenant had left in a hurry, according to the landlord. Something about a job opportunity in another state. I didn't think much of it. The apartment was clean, freshly painted, and the price was right. For the first 2 weeks, everything was perfect. I was settling into my new routine. Wake up, go to work, come home, eat dinner, watch some Netflix, sleep, simple, peaceful. But then I started noticing the sounds. Subtle bass note tension begins. It began on a Tuesday night around 11 p.m. I was lying in bed, scrolling through my phone, when I heard footsteps above me. Now, I expected to hear my neighbors. Thin walls, remember? But these footsteps were different. They were slow, deliberate, like someone pacing back and forth, over and over again in the exact same path. I could track the steps. They'd start at what I assumed was the far left of the apartment above mine, walk slowly to the right, pause for exactly 3 seconds, then walk back. The pattern repeated for about 20 minutes before it finally stopped. I figured it was just my upstairs neighbor, maybe on a phone call or unable to sleep. I put in my earbuds and went to sleep. The next night, same thing. 11 p.m., the pacing started. Same exact pattern. Left to right, 3-second pause, right to left. 20 minutes, then silence. By the 4th night, I was getting annoyed. The pacing was loud enough that I could hear it clearly even with my TV on. I decided I'd introduce myself to my upstairs neighbor the next day, maybe politely mention the noise. That Friday after work, I went up to the 4th floor. The apartment above mine was 4C. I knocked on the door. No answer. I knocked again, a bit louder. Still nothing. I tried the apartment manager's office. Mrs. Chen had been managing the building for 15 years and knew everything about everyone. "Excuse me, Mrs. Chen. I was wondering if you could tell me who lives in 4C. She looked up from her computer, adjusting her glasses. 4C? That unit's been vacant for 3 months, honey. We're actually showing it to potential tenants next week. Deep bass hit first major reveal. I felt my stomach drop. Vacant? Are you sure? Positive. The last tenant moved out in June. Why do you ask? I explained the footsteps, trying to sound casual about it. Mrs. Chen frowned. That's strange. I'll have maintenance check it out. Make sure there's no animals or anything getting in. Old building, you know. Sometimes squirrels get into the ceiling space. I went back to my apartment feeling uneasy, but I accepted her explanation. Maybe it was animals. Maybe the sound was carrying weird through the old building. Maybe I was hearing the people in 4B or 4D and just thought it was directly above me. That night, I paid closer attention. At exactly 11 p.m., the footsteps started. I stood on my bed and pressed my ear to the ceiling, trying to pinpoint the exact location. The sound was definitely coming from directly above me, from 4C, the vacant apartment. I grabbed my phone and called Mrs. Chen, even though it was late. She answered on the 3rd ring, sounding groggy. Mrs. Chen, I'm really sorry to call so late, but the footsteps are happening right now, right above me. From 4C, there was a long pause. I'll come check it out. Give me 5 minutes. Tension music swells. Those 5 minutes felt like an hour. The footsteps continued their pattern. Back and forth, 3-second pause, back and forth. Then I heard it. A knock on my door. I looked through the peephole and saw Mrs. Chen standing there with her master keyring. I opened the door. "It's still happening," I whispered, pointing at the ceiling. She nodded, her expression serious now. "Let's go look." We went upstairs together. Mrs. Chen unlocked the door to 4C and flipped on the lights. The apartment was completely empty. No furniture, no boxes, nothing, just bare walls, bare floors, and that distinctive smell of a place that's been unoccupied for a while. But here's the thing. The apartment layout was identical to mine. I could see exactly where the footsteps would be pacing, from the left wall to the right wall of the main room. We stood there in silence, listening. From downstairs, faintly, I could hear my TV that I'd left on, but there were no footsteps. No sounds at all from this apartment. "See?" Mrs. Chen said. "Nothing here. Sound must be traveling from another unit." We went back downstairs to my apartment. The moment I opened my door, we both heard it, clear as day. Footsteps, right above us, coming from 4C. Eerie, strings, impossible situation. Mrs. Chen's face went pale. "What the hell?" We ran back upstairs. She unlocked 4C again. The apartment was silent and empty, just like before. But down in my apartment, if we'd been there, we would have heard the footsteps. "This doesn't make any sense," Mrs. Chen muttered. She pulled out her phone and called the maintenance supervisor, Dave. Even though it was almost midnight, she told him to get to the building immediately. Dave arrived 20 minutes later with his toolbox. By then the footsteps had stopped for the night, right on schedule at 11:20 p.m. The three of us went into 4C. Dave checked everything, the floors, the walls, the ceiling, the pipes, the heating vents. He looked for any structural issue that could explain the sound. "Everything's solid," Dave finally said. "I don't know what to tell you." Mrs. Chen turned to me. "Do you want to switch apartments? I have a unit available on the second floor." I was exhausted and freaked out, but I said yes immediately. We agreed I'd move the next day. That night, I barely slept. Every sound made me jump, but the footsteps didn't come back. The next morning, Saturday, Dave and another maintenance guy helped me move my stuff down to 2B. It took a few hours, but by early afternoon I was settled in my new apartment. Mrs. Chen gave me the first month free as an apology for the disturbance. I felt ridiculous for making such a big deal over some unexplained sounds, but I also felt relieved to be out of 3C. Music quiets false sense of relief. That night, around 10:30 p.m., I got a text from an unknown number. "Hey, just moved into 3C. Did you used to live here?" I figured it was the new tenant. Maybe they found my number somehow. I texted back, "Yeah, just moved out yesterday." 3 dots appeared, like they were typing. Then, "Did you ever hear footsteps from the apartment above you? Sudden bass, drop, dread, returns." My blood went cold. I called the number immediately. A guy answered, sounding young, maybe my age. "Dude, I'm not trying to freak you out," he said. "But I've been here for like 6 hours and I keep hearing someone walking around upstairs. Back and forth. Back and forth. It's driving me crazy." And the apartment manager said that unit's empty. I told him everything. The pacing, the pattern, the investigation. I told him to get out of that apartment. "Man, I just signed a year lease," he said, "and I already paid first and last month. I can't just leave." I gave him my new number and told him to call me if anything else happened. Then I called Mrs. Chen. "You rented out 3C already?" I asked. "Even after what happened?" She sighed. "Alex, I run a business. I can't just leave a unit empty because of some weird sounds. The new tenant didn't ask about any issues, so I didn't volunteer the information." I hung up, feeling sick. I thought about calling the new tenant back, insisting he'd get out of there. But what could I say that I hadn't already said? For the next week, I didn't hear from him. I almost convinced myself that maybe the sounds had stopped, that whatever it was had resolved itself. Then, exactly 1 week later, I got another text from that number. It was 11:47 p.m. Ominous drone note. "It's not just footsteps anymore." I called him. No answer. I texted back, "What do you mean? What else is happening?" The reply came 5 minutes later, knocking. On the floor, right below where the footsteps are. Like someone's trying to get my attention. It started tonight at 11:20, right after the pacing stopped. I felt a chill run down my spine. I texted, "Get out of that apartment. Right now, I'm serious." No response. I tried calling again, straight to voicemail. At 7 a.m. the next morning, I went to the 3rd floor and knocked on 3C. No answer. I knocked harder. Nothing. I went to Mrs. Chen's office. "The new tenant in 3C, have you seen him today?" She shook her head. "Not since he moved in." "Why?" I showed her the texts. Her face went from annoyed to concerned as she read them. "We went to 3C together. She knocked, called out, then finally used her master key to open the door. Silence, then slow, haunting strings. The apartment was empty. Not just empty of people, empty of everything. No furniture, no boxes, no sign that anyone had moved in at all." "That's impossible," Mrs. Chen whispered. "He moved in a week ago. I helped him with the paperwork myself." She pulled out her phone and called the number the lease was under. We heard a phone ringing inside the apartment. We followed the sound to the bathroom. There, sitting on the edge of the bathtub, was a cell phone. The same number that had been texting me. But here's what made us both step back in horror. Next to the phone was a piece of paper, handwritten. It said, "I finally found what was making the sounds. It was coming from inside the walls. I'm going to check the space above the bathroom ceiling. If I don't come back, tell my parents I love them. Marcus Chen." September 15th, 2021. Sharp string stab, major reveal. Mrs. Chen's hand flew to her mouth. That's my nephew. He lived in 4C. He's the one who moved out in June. He told me he got a job in Seattle." "Did he go to Seattle?" I asked, already knowing the answer. She pulled out her phone with shaking hands and dialed a number. I heard a woman's voice answer, Mrs. Chen's sister. "Is Marcus there?" Mrs. Chen asked quietly. I watched her face crumple as she listened to the response. She ended the call and looked at me with tears in her eyes. "He's been missing since June. They filed a police report. They thought he'd run away because he'd been acting strange, paranoid, kept talking about sounds in his apartment. We called the police immediately. What they found in the ceiling space above 4C's bathroom, I won't describe in detail. Let's just say Marcus had been right. Something had been in the walls. Or someone. Dark, heavy music. They found a hidden access panel in the back of the closet in 4C, leading to a crawl space that ran between the floors. The space was big enough for a person to move through, connecting several apartments. Inside, they found evidence that someone had been living in the walls of the building, blankets, food wrappers, and worse things I don't want to think about. They also found Marcus's wallet and phone. The real ones. The phone in the bathroom had been a burner, left there by whoever had been in the walls. The building was evacuated and searched top to bottom. They never found who had been living in there, but they found more hidden panels, more crawl spaces, more signs of someone moving through the building's infrastructure, like it was their personal maze. The building was condemned 2 weeks later due to safety violations. Mrs. Chen lost her job, I lost my security deposit and had to find a new place fast. But here's what haunts me the most. Music fades to almost silence. The police determined that Marcus had likely died in June, which means he couldn't have texted me in September. Someone else had his phone. Someone who knew I'd lived in 3C. Someone who watched me move to 2B. Someone who wanted me to know they were still there. I live in a house now. A small house with no neighbors above, below, or beside me. I check every closet, every crawl space, every possible hiding spot. And sometimes, late at night, I get texts from unknown numbers. They never say much. Usually just, "I miss our old building," or "You should have stayed in 3C. I don't respond anymore. I just block the number and try to sleep. But I always listen for footsteps. Long pause, 3 seconds of complete silence. Distant footsteps, sound, effect, fade out.